where we shine a beacon on the simple yet powerful shifts that lead to lasting transformation. Today's guest is Zander Sprague, licensed professional clinical counselor, author of Epic Begins with One Step Forward, and host of the Epic podcast and TV show. Xander knows that big change starts small, and his unique blend of clinical insight and real life wisdom empowers people to overcome adversity, grow through grief, and thrive. Tonight, we'll explore the power of one small step, two magic words, and the game changing 97 by 3 rule. Because the path to an epic life doesn't have to be complicated. Welcome to the show, Xander. It's an honor to have you.
Oh, thank you so much. I am honored to be here and to share what wisdom I have with your audience.
Absolutely. So, Xander, your mantra is epic begins with one step forward. Why is that single step so powerful? And how can it transform even the biggest challenges?
I think all of us have epic things that we would like to achieve in our life. Things that we might say, someday I'd like to run a marathon or write a book or travel somewhere. And oftentimes we think about it a lot. And surprisingly, that first step to your epic journey is not nearly as difficult as you might think. And so I'd like to encourage people to think about their epic dreams, go after it, and realize that that first step is all it takes to begin that journey.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, was there a moment in your life where that one step made all the difference?
There multiple multiple times I have to say where that first step made an epic difference in my life. If you'd asked me in university whether I would write a book, I would say absolutely not. I'm a talker, not a typer. I never imagined writing a book, and yet I've written three. So that for me in writing a book, that first step was deciding to write a book, but most importantly, it was figuring out how I was going to write the book. And then I discovered that it wasn't as difficult as I thought. Another time was I'd always dreamed of running a marathon. Uh, but 26.2 miles is a really long way. And I was like, how am I ever going to figure out how to do that? And I live here in the United States. I looked around for kind of marathon training programs and joined Team in Training, which is a fundraising arm of the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And that epic first step was I was handed a training schedule that made it really easy. I would look at it and it might say, go run 3 miles. So I'd go do it. And guess what? That's the only thing I had to do that day to train for my marathon. So it wasn't as hard as I imagined it would be.
That's amazing. That insight that movement creates momentum is the spark many need to get unstuck.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the great thing about that first step is you realize that it wasn't as hard as you imagined. And then you're like, okay, well, now I'm ready to take the next step. And once you do that, all of a sudden you're taking many steps and you're on your way to achieving your goal. And that's really exciting. And it's exciting to help people on their epic journey and see the progress they're making, and honestly just have a front row seat to the success that they're having.
Absolutely. So, you mentioned two magic words that can dramatically boost success. Can you reveal those to us and why they're
I
so effective?
absolutely can. I think a the two words are not yet. And I think on our epic journeys, they often take time for us to achieve. And not yet is so important. So I'll take writing the book. Um, when I wrote my first book, I obviously had no idea. And the writing part takes time, but then there's all of the editing that has to happen for your book to come out. And people knew I was writing a book, and people said, "Oh, is it coming out?" And if I just said no, then it makes it sound like it's never ever going to happen. No is such a final ending word, right? It just sort of ends the conversation. Whereas not yet says it's happening, it's just not today. And perhaps a better example that's more relatable to people, um, if someone's in their first year of university, you probably don't go up to them and say, "Do you have your degree yet?" Because we realize that there's 4 years, or depending on the degree, maybe 6 years, that it's going to take you to earn that degree. So you're not asking someone who's in their first year whether they have their um, degree yet. They'd be like, "No, not yet. I'm only a freshman." So I think that's not yet should be your companion, because it says, "I'm working on it, but I haven't achieved it quite quite yet." And I think that's so powerful. There's so much optimism that happens when you say not yet. It invites people in to share your journey and allows you to share what you're doing and perhaps ask for their support.
Absolutely. So, do you have a story where those words shifted the course of someone's journey?
Absolutely. I was working with a client of mine who had wanted to make a pretty significant transition in their career in the job that they were doing. They were working in the corporate world, and they were interested in getting into mental health. And so um, that's a bit of a journey, because you have to go to graduate school, depending on what state you live in. Here in the United States, different states have different requirements for licensing, and they happen to be in California. So you need 3,000 hours of internship. So in helping map out their journey, it helped for them to understand how long it could, at a minimum, how long it would take, and realize that they probably might need a little more time. That journey for them took about uh 4.5 years between starting graduate school and getting the internship hours they needed to then become licensed. And that not yet was really important, because people knew that they were, her friends knew that she was working on it, but she was, they said, "Oh, do you have your license?" "Not yet. I'm still working on my hours to be able to take the exam." And she, in working with her, she said that being able to say not yet felt very empowering, because if she just said no, it felt discouraging. But by being able to say not yet, it kept her motivated, and it allowed her to understand that the journey she was on was a multi-year journey. And most of us, when we take on something epic, sometimes it does take months or years for us to achieve it.
That's amazing. And that reminder that language shapes a mindset is so empowering.
It really is. I mean, the way that we talk to ourselves, I think, is so very important. And sadly, I think all of us are um, guilty of perhaps being the meanest person in our life. The things that we say to ourselves often are not very kind. Perhaps we have that internal thought that um, I'm not smart enough. I don't know what I'm doing. What I have to say is not important. Uh, w- that kind of negative self-talk is can be very defeating. And I encourage people to not be the meanest person in your life, to actually be your number one cheerleader. Because if you don't believe in you, how can I believe in you? The example I like to give is if we're watching television or listening to an ad on the radio, when they're advertising, let's say, a car, they're not saying, our car is really good up until about 50,000 miles. And then, the transmission could fall out and perhaps the wheel will come off, right? They're not telling you that. They're telling you all the great things about the car and why you want to buy it. Well, for each of us as an individual, whatever we're doing, we have to be our number one cheerleader. We have to believe unfailingly in our own success. How else are other people going to believe in you if you don't believe in you?
I absolutely agree. So, the 97 by 3 rule offers an instant perspective shift. Can you break that down for us and explain how it helps reframe challenges?
Absolutely. So I'm a firm believer that most days, 97% of our day is good and up to 3% isn't as good. Now, yes, there are days where we just have a bad day and it's more than 3%. But in general, I think there's only about 3% of our day that doesn't go exactly as we had hoped. And yet, I guess being a mental health professional, I get curious about how we as human beings view things and how we talk about stuff. And oftentimes we tend to focus on just on that 3%, what didn't go right today, completely ignoring that 97 that went well. And um I don't think I think it needs to be reversed. There's so many great things that have already happened in my day, and I need to remember those so that when something doesn't go quite as well as I would hope, then I go, but yes, there's so much more that's going right. I have what I call the picnic analogy. Let's say we're all at a picnic and it's a beautiful sunny day. And let's say we're at this picnic for 4 hours and it rains for 2 minutes during that whole picnic time. And although it's inconvenient and we get wet, the other 3 hours and 58 minutes is just fine. And I ask you, oh, how was the picnic? Oh, it rained on us. You completely ignored that that was only 2 minutes out of 4 hours. Why? I don't get it. I want us to focus on that 97% of our day that is good because there are so many good things. And we tend to forget that. I think it's so important to really pay attention to the positive stuff that's going on in your life. And again, it's the small stuff. I woke up this morning. I didn't doubt that I would wake up this morning, but that's a really great way to start your day. I woke up. Um, I had a delicious breakfast. The sun is out. I got to go outside and walk. These are all good things. I should remember them.
Yeah, definitely. So, is there a way listeners can apply this rule today to lighten their mental load?
Absolutely. Again, I'll give another. I love analogy, so just hold on, everyone. Everything's got an analogy here, but um, In baseball, at the end of your career, if you have a career batting average over 300, you can make it into the Baseball Hall of Fame. So that basically means that you got some kind of a hit one out of every three times that you went up to bat. But let's apply it to our day. Let's say that you have 9 hours of between work and just family daily activity, 9 hours of work that you're doing. Imagine if you could have a Hall of Fame day if only 3 hours of that 9 hours had to be productive and good. That's not a particularly high bar for us. I only got to get 3 hours right, and I have a Hall of Fame day. So I think when you catch yourself focusing on the things that didn't go right, stop and ask yourself what did go right? What were the positive parts of my day? How how can I focus more on the positive parts and acknowledge the negative parts or the stuff that doesn't go quite so right. I don't want to say negative, but things that didn't go quite so right. Maybe you hit some traffic. Maybe you were going to be late and you hit every red light as you were going to a meeting. You can acknowledge that you didn't like that, but you should acknowledge all the great stuff that's happening in your day. That kind of a mental shift really helps to change how you're looking at everything. And honestly, my own experience is that I'm a lot happier because I'm focused on the stuff that's going well. Yes, there are days where I have to focus on stuff that's not going quite so well. And I do acknowledge that, but I also try and balance it off with um, all the stuff that is going well, because there is so much more that's going well in each of our days.
Absolutely. And that reframe, that 97% of what happens is outside our control, is so freeing.
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
So, as someone who specializes in resilience and personal growth, how do you guide people through grief, especially sibling loss, which often goes unspoken?
That's a good question. You know, I'm a sibling survivor myself. I lost my sister 28 years ago, and um, it is unfortunately not acknowledged very well, and people um, didn't really ask how I was doing. They asked how my parents were doing when I saw them, but no one asked how I was. And here's some interesting things. The longest relationship we have in our life is with our siblings. And by and large, we all expect that our siblings are going to be around for the majority of our life. And I think that's a fair assumption for each of us to make. But when you lose a sibling, as my good friend Heidi Horsley says, you lose your past, your present, but also your future. There are all those things that your sibling is not around to see. Perhaps it's graduations, perhaps it's marriage, children, life events, and they're simply not around. And I think that is really hard. And I do help um, people through grief, and I do work with um, sibling survivors, because it's so important for them to have an outlet and for their grief to be acknowledged. Unacknowledged grief, I think, has a very significant impact on people's mental health and sometimes their physical health. Um, Sometimes people with unacknowledged grief will look to um, not as healthy ways of coping. Perhaps it's um, drinking or taking drugs. Perhaps they're engaging in behavior that may put their own life in danger. And all of that as a way to deal with um, the the grief. And so I try and help people realize that there is there is a pathways through this. Each of our grief journeys is unique. There isn't a right way to grief. Your grief process, your grief journey is different than mine, but I can be there to support you. I can I can help you when you have those questions. It is so helpful to have um, people who are have also gone through this to help you along, um, because you get to have the conversations you want to have about the things that are bothering you. Perhaps it's um, your relationship with your parents. One of the things I've heard often is someone who's a young adult when their sibling died, all of a sudden the parents, understandably, are very worried about the living child and want to know, you have to text me when you leave your house or apartment and text me when you've arrived safely wherever you're going. And if you don't, then they're calling you all the time. But in the meantime, before your sibling passed, you were a fully functioning adult without calling your parents every time you left your house. And I help them understand where, give perspective of where the parents are coming from and how they may talk to their parents. A great organization that I belong to, I'm actually sit on the board of, it's called the Compassionate Friends, and it's for families that have lost a child or a sibling. And I really I love this organization. It's so helpful for me to be able to talk to my fellow sibling survivors.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, is there a piece of advice you offer that helps honor grief while still moving forward?
Absolutely. I tell people that they should celebrate the rainbow of their sibling, of their child's life. My sister Lucy was 30 years old. There is 30 years of fabulous things that she did. And for me personally, but also for my family, it feels so much more rewarding to celebrate the rainbow that was her life versus just focusing solely on the dot that was the end of her life. And I encourage people to remember all the great things that your sibling, your child, whoever it is that you may have lost. And it's not just people dying. Maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's a job. Remember all the stuff that was good, because it's not all bad. And if we just, again, sort of brings us back to that 3%, right? If all you do is focus on the 3%, then it looks like it was raining and just raining the whole time you had that picnic, and that wasn't the actual case. um and the other thing that I tell people is, we tend to, when someone dies, we tend to sort of forget all of the times where people weren't so nice. I love my sister very much. I miss her. She was a great person. But there were times where she wasn't very nice to me as a sibling. I don't forget that. I tell those stories, the good stories, but also when maybe she made a mistake. Maybe she was sort of mean to me. Maybe there was a time where she had taken all of my sweaters, and it was wintertime and I was cold. And I'm like, where are all my sweaters? Well, Lucy had come in and said, well, I really like that sweater, Xander. So she took it and then she took another one. And so there I am without a sweater. And she's like, oh, I have all these great sweaters. So remembering that we don't need to canonize the dad. If you're a parent and you've lost a child, keep in mind that your living children cannot compete with a dead child. I cannot compete with Lucy. She will never make another mistake in her life. That's that's okay, but I can't compete against a dead person.
Absolutely. And that balance, that healing can coexist with remembering is so meaningful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the way that I keep Lucy alive in my life is to remember her, to talk about her, to get curious about her life. As I said, she was 30 years old. There's, a good 10 years of her life where she was at college and she was living on her own and she was working, where I don't have as good a glimpse into that part of her life, but in the last 28 years, as I meet people who work with her and knew her outside of her being my sister, of her being her own person, I've learned so much about her. And I think that's really awesome. I think that's great. I love to hear that. I love to hear the stories about how people knew Lucy and what they did. So I think talking about the people that we've lost is really important. It's how we keep them alive in our life.
Absolutely. So, for listeners today feeling overwhelmed or like they can't start, what's the one first step you'd invite them to take today?
I think structure is really important. And if whatever your epic dream is, if you think about the steps that you believe that you need to take, and let me just emphasize, you're not going to know all the steps you need to take, and that's okay. It's kind of like when you get up in the morning, you don't have the answers to every single question that you're going to encounter today, but it doesn't stop you from getting up and starting your day. So if you're thinking about doing something epic, but you're not sure how to do it, you feel overwhelmed, structure is your friend, because I referenced I was handed a training schedule for my first marathon. That made it so much easier. I didn't have to think about it. I just needed to look at my schedule and do what it told me to do that day. And if you write out the steps you think you need to do, so perhaps it's, let's take writing a book. Um, you say, all right, well, I'm going to write for a half an hour, or I'm going to write 5 pages, or however you want to structure it. But if you know that that's what you have to do, it's so much easier to execute, because most of us do really well with structure. It makes us feel comfortable. Kind of makes sense. It's a basic human psychological need. Structure makes us feel comfortable. We understand what's happening. It's the unknown that and change that sometimes make us feel uncomfortable. So that first step is create some structure, understand what you think you need to do, but be open to the fact that the path may change a little as you discover more or as you take more steps.
That message, that epic journey begins with the smallest step, is such a hopeful anchor.
Yeah, at least I hope so. I know it is for me that on all of my epic journeys, it really did begin with that one step forward.
Absolutely. So, Xander Sprague reminds us that living an epic life isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up one step at a time. Whether it's two magic words, the 97 by 3 rule, or simply choosing to move forward today The power of transformation is already within you. So take that first step because epic truly begins with just one.